Well, hello Stitchers, and welcome to Floss Tube number 19 and a half, I guess. I don't know if this is really called a floss tube. I've only got one stitch because I'm going to be framing this, and so I talked about this in my last video about how I was doing my own framing now, buying frames from Hobby Lobby and then framing it myself. And I had, some requests to show you how I did that, so I asked you if you all wanted to watch me when I was framing, and an overwhelming amount of you said yes, so thank you. So I just thought I would invite you into my studio here and just show you how I frame my cross stitches. So here I've got my finished cross stitch. This is the Lord's Prayer. So I'm going to try to remember to walk you through step by step of everything that I do, and so that I don't leave anything out. But if you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them. So what I do is, of course, finish my stitch, and then I press from the back. I don't press from the front, but I press from the back. I do not use steam, but I do use a water bottle because I don't use a steam iron anyway. I just do a water bottle, and I mist the back of it, and I press it. I try not to iron. I don't want to pull any threads or anything, so I just press it, and that's how I prepare to get my cross stitches framed, or if I'm framing them myself. And then I will take and I will measure exactly what it finishes from the center of the cross stitch from here to here and from here to here, and then I will write down what that finished size is, and then I will decide. So say it's, I can't remember what the measurements of this are right now, but say it's 14 by 16. Then, and if I want like a 1/2 inch around it, then I will write down a 1/2 inch on each side, which would be 1 inch. So that would mean I want the opening of the frame to be 15 by 17, because that's what you're going to have to tell the framer at Hobby Lobby in the department, that you want the opening of the frame. It doesn't matter what the outside of the frame measures, it matters what the opening measures, right? And that's what you want, that opening of the frame to measure, okay? So that's what I do. Then I take them in and put them on a design board and put another design board on top of it to keep them nice and protected so that I can pick out the frame, okay? And so then my Hobby Lobby here takes a couple of weeks to do the frames, and when I order the frames, I ask them to please put the hanging thing on it right here, and then they do like it's like a foam core board, and it's acid free. You can get it thin or you can get it thicker. You can buy it if you have a ready-made frame and you want to do a backing for yourself. I would want to use acid free. And so you can either buy it thinner or thicker. They always cut it, so I have them cut it, and they have these little things in there that holds it in, okay? And then they also put these little non-slip things right here so it doesn't scratch your walls. So they stick out farther than this, so it doesn't scratch your walls. Let's see, I don't happen to get glass on my framed. I just don't like glass on my framed pieces, because I like to see the texture and everything on there. But of course you can have glass made for yours, and if you have glass cut for yours, remember to ask them to put spacers, because you do not want your glass touching your stitching. So ask them to put spacers between your glass. Okay, I hope that's enough information on letting you know what to do when you go to order your frames. And then this is how it comes. And so I just go ahead and pull these up. I take the board out, okay? It's lightweight. It's like a foam core. It's like what I make my design boards out of. And let me just set this down here. And so then the next step that I do, I've got one of these little hanging things that came out, but that's easy to put back in, not a big deal. I'll set that aside. So the next step that I do is I want to do batting between, the board and my frame. So I happen to cut this the exact same size. You can cut it bigger if you want, glue it down and then trim it. on the board. I've done it both ways, but for the sake of the video, I decided to just cut it exact size so that I could quickly glue it and not have to worry about trimming. So what I use for batting is, again, I want to use something all natural. This is going to be the only thing right here that touches my stitching. Okay, and this is Warm and Natural batting, and that's what I use. It's 100% cotton. That's what I use for a lot of my quilts, and I just buy it by the package. This one happens to be a 45 by 60 inch. It's like, you know, for a baby quilt size. But I just use this and then just cut into it, keep it into my closet, and this goes a long way, okay? And so that's what that looks like. And so when I go to glue that on, I will use fabric glue. Now this is Fabri-Tac glue, but this is not the bottle that it comes in. The bottle that it comes in is really a thick plastic, and it's hard for me to squeeze this thick glue out. You could use a glue gun if you wanted to. I've done that before as well. Any of the glue that you use will not touch your fabric, but you know, I just kind of wanted to let you know that that's what I use. So this bottle, what I do is this is a Sugar Bell bottle that you can get at Michael's and probably Joann's. I'm not sure, maybe even Hobby Lobby, but it's a frosting, it's an icing bottle that you do to do frosting. But the plastic is easier to squeeze, and it's got this lid on it. Okay, it's got this silicone lid that you can just pull off, and then it's got this nice icing tip, and I like that it's got this tip so that I can control that. Okay, and so how I glue it is, of course, this is thick, so it's going to take a minute to come out, but I'm going to go ahead and just glue this whole thing right along the edge. I'll do that off camera, and then, you know, so that you can see, but I do it a little at a time. Like I'll glue right here, put that down, pull up that corner, glue, and you want to stretch it so that it's, I mean, when I say you can stretch it a little bit, you kind of don't want to stretch it a lot. You want it nice and even, okay? And when I cut mine evenly, I literally just put the mat board on top of the batting, okay? And then you can use a ruler and a rotary cutter, or you can use some fabric scissors. If you're cutting batting, you would want to use fabric scissors. Okay, and so that's what I do with that to prepare that. And then I'm just going to let you know what it's going to look like when I come back as far as preparation. So in here, I've got cotton crochet thread, and I've got thread scissors right here, and I've got needles. So the cotton crochet thread is, again, a natural product, and this is what I use to do my lacing. And I prefer the lacing method. I am not a professional framer. This is a disclaimer. This is just how I do it. It's worked for me for many, many years. I used to do my framing myself before I found, you know, framers in my area that were professional. But now that Jamie has retired, then I'm back to doing it myself. And I've been super happy with the frames that Hobby Lobby has made for me, and I like the selection so far. And so this is what the cotton crochet thread looks like. Okay, it's just 100% mercerized Egyptian cotton. You can get it in the crochet aisle in any craft store, okay? And it goes a long way, and it's very inexpensive. So that's what that looks like. I like to use longer needles. These are doll needles. These ones are the Sewology. I happen to get these. That's Hobby Lobby's brand. So I got those there. There's 3 sizes. I don't use the biggest size because I feel like the eye is too big, but I do use the 4 smaller ones. So I have a couple of packages of those that I got. And then this thing I got at, it's a Robert Stanley. You can see that in there. Maybe I'll put it right side up. And that's a Robert Stanley, and it was to hold, like at a garden party or a wedding or something, you could put your paper cups in here and the pen in here so that you could write your name on the cups. But I thought it was perfect to use for that. So I picked that up. I like how it holds my needles, and then I just put my scissors there. Okay, so there's my cotton crochet thread. And then you'll need a pin cushion. Here's my little vintage truck pin cushion that I made. I actually have a tutorial here on my channel on how I make my vintage pin cushions, but I like to use a lot of needles and thread them, okay? And I usually thread them probably about I don't know, 60 inches long approximately, I don't know, 1.5 yards. Instead of threading one needle like with great big long threads, I like to thread several needles with about, like I say, a 60 inch, and then you'll want to put a knot at the end. Okay, the knot doesn't have to look beautiful or anything, you'll never see it, you just need a knot in the end so it won't pull out of the edges of your linen. Okay, and so that's what that looks like, what I have ready to go that way. And so I'm going to turn off the camera real quick, get this glued down, and then show you the next step on what I do to begin lacing. Okay, so I've got this all glued. It's so much nicer to use this bottle that's a little bit more squeezable. I mean, I've used it in the bottle that it comes in too, but it's just a little bit harder because it's such thick glue. But because it's fabric glue, that's what I like to use. I have this with my paper crafting. And so anyway, so that's just a little tip, you know, something that you might find useful. And so I just, once again, glued around the edges, put the batting right back down. It doesn't, it's smooth, but it's not stretched, and it's not loose. I can't lift it, and it's not puckered or anything like that, so it'll be a nice base for my stitching. And so then I bring my stitching in, and I lay it down. Here, let me pull this in. I'm gonna try to keep in view of the camera at all times. Okay, so I lay it down like this, and before I start stitching, now the thing about doing lacing is you can always adjust this as you go along, but I do try to, you know, I like to lay it down as near the center as I can, meaning I look here and I'm like thinking, okay, that looks like 3/4 of an inch, and that looks like more, so I'm going to kind of move that down, and so that looks pretty even on the edges there. You can see where that bends. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to turn that and see if I can start, you know, pretty close to centered. And because there's batting here, I can usually move it and shift it just like, you know, sliding it and pushing it instead of lifting it up and down. Okay, so that's pretty close. And so then what I do is I just make sure that when I flip it over, because that batting helps to keep it like that, that even though it looks kind of crooked this way, I know that I started with it straight. Let's try it one more time just to make sure I didn't get it crooked. That looks pretty good. Because just because this is serged, that doesn't mean it's serged straight on the linen, right? Okay, so I've got it like that. I'm not too worried about that. I just kind of approximate, you know, the center. And then I just grab a needle, and while I was gluing, I hurried and did a bunch of threading of the rest of the needles so that I was ready to go. And I personally like to start from the center out. That doesn't mean you have to. I just, because I lined it up, I just kind of like to start from the center out. And what I do is I take a side stitch right here in the linen or in the serging, meaning I don't just take one stitch and go like this. I want to take a double stitch, I don't know, side stitch, whatever you want to say. The needle's going in and then coming out sideways. And then I'm just coming straight across right here. And I don't go all the way on the very, very edge because, you know, I don't want to pull my threads out. This side doesn't happen to be serged, and that's okay, it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to pull this a little bit closer to me so I can see what I'm doing. And so what I'm doing is I am just sewing from one side to the other. And, you know, I try to do it straight. Sometimes it doesn't always end up that way, but that does not matter. You can straighten it out with your next stitch, you know, as you're coming along. And the point is you're just lacing it like about 1/4 of an inch apart, each one, because I want it to be nice and smooth. This is a small count linen, and I want it to be nice and smooth. Now, but you don't want to pull it so hard that you're going to distort your stitches on the other side, right? You don't want to do that. You just want it nice and smooth, and this is all I'm worried about right here, that's smooth. The rest will smooth out as I go along. Now, because this thread won't go all the way to here and I need to knot it, meaning it will be too short of a tail for me to knot, then I'm just going to go ahead and knot this. So usually with each, depending on how big your stitch is, you know, you can go across 2 or 3 or 4 times if it's a smaller stitch. And so then I just make a loop. Let me show you that one more time. So I just did a stitch in the linen. So there's a loop, and I put my needle through the loop, and I just hold my finger on there so I don't get any knots. Then I go ahead and put my needle back in there and just cut off, leaving, you know, I don't know, 1/2 inch tail, okay? And then I just pick up another needle and I continue on. And so that's why it's easier for me. Now I can kind of straighten this out a little bit more by starting down here by doing a stitch. And then I can come up here and go right back on top of that one. And just as I go along, I'm straightening it out. And it's easier for me to just do several needles with, like I say, approximately 60 inches in it than it is to try to pull and not get knots and stuff like that. It's just easier for me to just do that, so that may be a tip. And so I do try to do this as straight across as I possibly can. I normally have about 2.5 to 3 inches around of linen around my fabric, so I have plenty of room to do this. But this was a small piece of linen that I started with on this, and I knew that I could do that as long as I have enough to wrap around, you know, the backing board or the foam core board, whatever you want to call it. And so that's what that's looking like on the other side. And I can always shift it later. That's the beauty of lacing. And, you know, I'm not too worried about that. I'm not too worried about if this is not straight going back and forth this way either. That really does not matter. I'm just keep in mind what you're trying to do is just lacing this nice and even. You're basically sort of, if you want to look at it, maybe this is a good way to look at it. You're sewing this around your board and trying to get it even without sewing it to your board, right? And I also like this method too, because if you ever wanted to change your mind and make this into a pillow or change it into another color of frame, or, you know, I'm known to do this. I've been cross-stitching for a long time, and sometimes I like to change things up a little bit. And I think maybe I want to do something else with this cross-stitch instead of have it in this frame. Maybe I want it to match another frame, you know, something, or, you know, that I'm framing, hanging it with or something like that. I like that I'm not ruining the integrity of my cross-stitch at all. I can take the frame apart and just cut these threads, and I can start again and do something else. Okay, so I'm just going back and forth, and each time I go back and forth, probably you're seeing the top of my head and all that stuff, so sorry about that. But each time I'm going back and forth, I pull it so that it's nice and, what do I want to say, snug, but not tight, right? Because you don't want to do it too loose, because if you do it too loose, then it won't look nice and straight, and it will be hard to get it to look good in the frame because it's loose. You just want it nice and flat, but not super tight and stretched out. I'm not trying to stretch it out. I'm just trying to keep it flat and then integrity of it. I like this linen right here that I use. It's kind of a little bit wrinkly and stuff like that, even though I pressed it and I like the look of that. It just tends to, you know, continue on with the look of making it look old. So I could have really pressed it, you know, put more water on and sprayed it with the spray bottle, but I and tried to get it flatter and flatter, and I guess pressed it within an inch of its life, but I really didn't want to do that. And I always do press my cross stitches from the back, and I press them on my homemade ironing boards, which just has thin batting on it with the board underneath. And so I don't want a lot of cushion on it to distort it or maybe make a little pleat or anything in it. And that's how I like to do my quilt blocks too. I like just a layer of batting and then the silver. Let's see, that was a little short. So I took another stitch, but I can wrap that around that previous thread, I think. Let's see how tricky I can be. There we go. I was able to knot it that way. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to continue going until I get probably about a 1/2 inch from the edge. Okay. And then I'm going to turn it around and start from that side and go out to a 1/2 inch of the edge. And then I'll be back and show you going from the other way and then how I do the corners. Okay. Okay. I'm back from my last break and I've got all of this laced right here from top to bottom, and this is what it looks like. So at this point, this is where I kind of start to go again side by side here and kind of straighten it out, and I can shift it. I don't really have to pull a lot or anything, like, you know, I don't want to pull this way. I'm just like shifting it. I can do this at any time. I can straighten this out at any time. So I don't have to feel like this is the final time during this stage to do it side by side, right? I can just, and then it might help. Let me see, let me grab, sometimes I'll do this. I'll grab one of my little rulers. Hang on. Okay, so this is one of my little quilting rulers, and I like that it's see-through and you can see the lines through it, so you can kind of hold that up there and see that looks like it's 3/4 of an inch. So I go over here and I'm like, okay, that's not quite 3/4 of an inch. This is more. So you can just kind of shift it over this way. And again, I'm not too worried about that being the final. You know, I do the final shifting at the end. And so now I just do the same thing as I start from the center and just take, I'm taking side stitches all the time just so that I don't want to lose the, you know, integrity of the edge of the linen. I want something that I can take a bite into. And, you know, I don't worry about trimming this. This one's obviously longer and this one's shorter. That doesn't bother me. Normally I have way more than this. It kind of strikes me as funny as the 2 lacing tutorials that I've had, is I've had very little edging, and that really is not the normal for me, but it just kind of ended up being that way with these 2. Sometimes I'm a little stingy with my linen and I want to make sure that I have enough to do another piece or something like that. And so sometimes I you know, try to get a stitch out of one piece when maybe I should leave a few more borders. But I mean, this works, but I'm just saying it, as long as I have, you know, 2 inches, I know I'm good, but I usually like to have, you know, 2.5, give me another half inch would have been, you know, even more ideal. But as long as it will wrap around, I'm not worried about it. You'll never see that from the front. And it's not gonna, you know, lose its integrity or the looks of it or anything like that. And so then I just continue going back and forth. From the center out. I'm trying to do this a little bit faster than I normally do because, for 2 reasons. I don't really want, I think it's kind of boring for you to see me just lace back and forth, back and forth, back and forth when it's the same thing over and over again. But I'm losing light because it's getting late afternoon and I am not used to daylight savings time yet, and that it gets dark earlier. So I want to make sure that I have enough light at the end of this video. So I'm just going to continuing, you know, because I'm right-handed, you can see I have a tendency to slant a little bit, but you can see that's what that's looking like. Now I can, you know, look at that. I can start shifting. I usually don't do the corner to corner thing like this, but I kind of come out from the center out until I do the corners. And so let me just tell you what I'm going to do. It's not going to be anything different. I'm just lacing all the way around, you know, until about a 1/2 inch clear on the edges. And then I'm going to come back, and I like to do, then I like to leave a little bit so that I have room to manipulate in the corners. I don't like to go all the way to the edge. And so when I do that, I'll usually fold my corners in like this because I haven't doubled my stitching. Okay, how do I explain that? Meaning, okay, so see when this is folded right here, and when I'm lacing back and forth, I will not go through both layers of this. I will just go through the top layer so that I can leave this out to tuck in how I need to. And then I'll stitch, after I finish stitching from side to side, you know, and vertically and horizontally, then I do a couple of stitches from corner to corner after folding in to make sure that this is all on the top here. And all of this work remains on the top. There's no knots or anything like that on the side, right? And then we'll talk about shifting and fixing that and shifting that at the end. But you know that you've stitched. One way to think about it too is you know that you've stitched on your linen and your Aida, whatever it is, your even weave straight, right? And so you can always line up your linen. You can put your readers on, line up your linen, and just kind of shift it like that in a straight line if you're really worried about it, if you think it's not straight. And you can always adjust this at any time, even after you've put it into your frame. And even though I put paper on the back of mine, I could rip the paper off and straighten it out again and then re-put paper on the back of my frame. The paper doesn't touch my cross stitch or anything like that if I feel like it needed to be adjusted. Now to me, you can see that this looks like this is going crooked up here. That's because I've laced from here to here, but I haven't laced here, so it's loose. But once this goes tight, it's gonna start to, you know, look straight like that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Once again, I'm going to turn the camera off and just go ahead and get that to that point so that I can show you how I finish it in the frame and after adjusting it and all of that. Hello again. Okay, so here I am. I've done from corner to corner. This is what this looks like so far. I just have the last corner to corner to do, and what I did with these corners is I just, like I said before, I used, like you can use the end of your long needle to kind of tuck those under, roll those under those corners a little bit, sort of like when wrapping a present, okay? Just so that not any is sticking out, all right? And I've got a couple needles threaded here, and this is where I will just go right on the corners here. And then I'll go through all layers. I guess you really wouldn't have to, but I usually do. Just kind of go through all the layers. And this is when I usually use the biggest size doll needles. I find these doll needles very handy. I like a longer needle. I like to use them as a tool, not just for putting a thread inside and out of fabric, but you know, like I showed you, I use the ends. I like that they have a larger eye, so it's easier to thread this cotton crochet. Okay, let me pull that tail out. And then I'm just going to knot that by simply taking my stitch, going through the loop. I like to hold it down so that it stays nice and flat. Sometimes I'll knot it twice, but that one felt pretty sturdy right there. And then I've got one more that I'm just going to go across, like right here. And so you may, you know, be asking yourself, why is she doing this so close together this way? Why aren't you doing it farther apart? Wouldn't it be quicker? Well, yeah, sure, it would be quicker, but because I'm sewing this around my board, it's kind of like gathering it almost. I'm not really gathering it, but when you gather something, you're doing stitches close together so it lies nice and smooth, right? So by lacing back and forth, my stitch, you know, this is even and smooth, and I don't have big gaps. Like if I went this far apart, maybe an inch apart or something, my stitches might kind of get distorted a little bit. And I don't want that. I just want to be able to lie nice and smooth. And if it's worth doing, it's worth doing, you know, even if it's a little bit better, even if it takes a little bit longer just to get that smooth. And, you know, I have no idea if this, I didn't even know if this was called lacing. You know, this is just something I've done for a long time. I can't maybe my grandma taught me. I don't know. I don't really remember her teaching me this, but it just kind of makes sense to, if I want to wrap around a stitch around a board to keep it straight, then I would sew it. I'm pretty comfortable with a needle in my hand, and I assume you are too, because you're cross stitchers, right? And so it's just easy to take a needle and thread and sew it around. I haven't done anything. There's no glue on my linen. There's no anything like that. Like I say, if I decided to change my mind or straighten it better because it wasn't straight or something, it didn't look like it, then I can always take it out of the frame and do it. And this is how I straighten it. Just as I go along, I'm just shifting. You can go like this if you feel like it needs to go over. Those corners are kind of the last thing that I do so that I can make sure, you know, I just look from point to point here, measure, you know, get my little ruler, measure out. And again, this is, you know, I don't know if this is the right way, wrong way, whatever. It's just a way that works for me, and that's all that I'm showing you. I'm hoping that I'm giving you some confidence that you can finish your own stitches. And, you know, I love professional framing. You know, I have many things professionally framed, but I feel just as confident hanging these on the wall that I framed next to professional framing, because it's in my house, right? And that's all that matters. It's my cross stitch, and if it doesn't matter to me, then why should it matter to anyone else, right? Those professional framers out there just do a beautiful job. But I just, you know, don't see a reason why we can't finish some of our own cross stitches on our own either. And I wanted to be able to show you that. And so now I've got my frame here, and I know that I want to be able to put it right side up. And so I know that this hanger is going to be at the top. So I just place that in there. Now, if you had glass, you put your glass, then your spacers, obviously, in there first. But I put this down here. I simply take a flathead screwdriver. Sometimes they're hard to push down, but I usually just have a flathead right here. And that one that came out went right in there, so I'll just put that in later. But I push those down so that that's nice and snug. Now you can see that there's still a little bit of space left around the outside of the frame, and I just always look and make sure that I've kind of centered it, and also that it's centered so it's not shifting one way or the other, so that it doesn't look differently in the front. And that's what that looks like. I hope you can see that whole thing. I tried to put the camera like way up high there. Every time I turn on and off the camera, I need to get on the stool so that I can do that. But I wanted you to be able to see that full and total view. And if I feel like that it's going crooked in any way, I can go like this still in the frame and kind of adjust it a little bit. Or you can just take it out and shift it. Okay. And then the last thing I do, this could be the last thing you do. You don't need to do anything else. You can just keep it in the frame like that. But I like to cover mine with paper. And so this is I have a piece of paper that I've cut an inch bigger than this back opening. Okay, the back opening obviously is a different size than the front opening. But I just cut it an inch bigger so that I have a 1/2 inch overhang, right? And you can take this off. You can take a Phillips head screwdriver and take this off. Some frames, if there's enough room, you can just slide it right back there and glue it. And then because I'm gluing paper to wood, I want this nice and smooth and straight as I can, but sometimes it may pucker a little bit. But I use my paper crafting glue. I use art glitter glue or Barely Art glue, and I like to use this little iPhone stand so that my glue is upside down, because so that it comes to the tip. And so what I do, I like this because it's a very fine tip of glue here, and I just kind of center this because I don't want to glob any glue on. I don't want it to get onto my linen or anything like that. And I'll simply just start on the corner right here, and I'll just do a fine, because this is really good glue. That's all you have to do, is just kind of start there. And I may, a lot of times I'll start in the center out on this as well, but I'm just going to hurry and glue this on so you can see. Whoops, pulled on that. And so usually I'll kind of turn it and work from one side to the other. I love this glue because it only takes a few seconds really to dry. I just want to make sure that I have enough coverage all the way around here. And just by holding it down a little bit, then it dries. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go from side to side. I'm going to shift that a little bit so that it's smoother. I'm going to go from side to side a little bit on the corner here so that I don't have gaps. It's usually what I do. Sorry if you're seeing my hair in the top of my head in my video here. Again, I'm trying to do this quick because the sun's going down. I do not like daylight savings time because I don't like it to get darker earlier. I don't know about you. Are you guys the same? And then I usually just do 1/2. Okay, that's going to be dry in about 5 seconds. Well, it looks like I need to start all the way up there. I kind of like the way the paper just finishes it. Plus, you know about my library card, I always like to, that's the final thing that I do, so I'll show you that here in a minute. And I like this tip here because of this glue that I can just really get under there. Okay, now there we go. So that's pretty smooth. I'm sure it's not as good as the professionals, but once again, it's good enough for who it's for. It's my framing, it's my cross stitch, and it goes in my house, and I just think if I'm happy with it, then that's all that matters. I don't think any cross stitch police are gonna come and say you have wrinkled paper or you didn't frame that right or something like that, right? And so that's what that looks like. Still, nothing changed in the front. And then I grab my library card, and this is the library card that I put all the information on there. And let's see, where's my little stickers? And I always have it in my stitching bag. These are the stickers that I use. These are double-sided, acid-free cross-stitch stickers for framing that are by It's So Emma. And so I just peel those off. And I put one on each corner. So my library card not only gives information on the stitch, you know, so this says it's, I started this October 1st of 2023, and this was my latest cross stitch of my Sabbath stitch. I put like my hashtags here. This is the Lord's Prayer. While I'm talking about this, let's turn it over. I know I've talked about this on my last 2 floss tubes, but again, here's the info on it. This is the Lord's Prayer, and it's by Lila's Studio, and I stitched it on 40 count off Agato by Fiber on a Whim, and I stitched with the called for a Veriswa silk threads of the 103s, and I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Love this stitch. I talked about in my last floss tube my next Sabbath stitch that I'm working on currently, and I love doing Sabbath stitches. And so what I do is I just make sure that I put it on the bottom, peel off those circles, and then I have all the info that I need. When it's hanging up or someone comes over and says, oh, I love that pattern, what's it called? And I'm like, of course, I don't think I would forget that this is called the Lord's Prayer. But sometimes, you know, you may forget, but I usually just put it down in the bottom corner here and stick it on. And so I not only have information in here, but a lot I'll write on the back, like my floss conversions if I had any. If it's one of my heritage samplers, I'll write about my grandma or something and put a little note in there and a picture of her in there. This is just a nice way to journal. I like my library cards to be a little bit looser so that I have room for that. If you're only putting a library card in, you could put like some washi tape on the back to make sure that you don't lose that. But this is what that looks like. I sure hope you can see that entire thing. I just love how this turned out. I'm so excited. I love this frame. And I love how it looks with the stitch. I love how these colors, you know, are dark, like the dark pieces in here that just kind of pulls it out. And so there it is. There's the Lord's Prayer. That's how I lace. I hope this inspires you to be able to frame some of your own pieces, maybe by framing some of your own pieces. For me, it gives me enough money that I can buy more linen, right? More threads, things like that. You can always have Hobby Lobby or Michael's or someone go ahead and frame yours, completely frame yours if you wanted to. But I have some trust issues sometimes, not with anybody there because I don't even know them, but that's the whole point. I don't know them and I have a hard time leaving my stitches with someone that I don't know. And so that's just me. I don't know if you guys are the same way, but I feel better at this point just having them make the frame for me and then I'm framing it myself. I've heard too many other people say that the chain stores have like done theirs crooked or cut off some of their designs or something like that, and then they don't know about it until after it's already framed, right? Until after they go to pick it up and see the finished piece. So this way I'd like it to be able to see the frame, make sure it's was cut correctly and that I can fit it in there and it's going to be how I want it to look before I continue on. And that way, if you know, if a mistake is made, then I know it was the mistake was on my behalf and that I can figure out how to fix it before I completely frame it. And so I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I will be back after Thanksgiving with my Floss Tube number 20, which is my Christmas stitching. And I'd love to show you all about what I've been stitching for Christmas and finishing up and what I'm still stitching and all that fun stuff. So happy stitching, everyone. I hope you're all doing well and I will chat with you later.